Wanted to get your thoughts on Volkanovski and
Islam.
Islam, yeah.
I got so much stick for picking Charles against Islam, which was crazy because a lot of people picked Charles. People saying you haven't give props to Islam. I have. He looked unbelievable that night. He absolutely dominated Charles. I would have put up a better fight than Charles did that night, to be honest. But
while they're both at different stages of their UFC career, Islam Makhachev and Paddy Pimblett are two of the hottest prospects in the UFC at the moment, with both looking to continue their rise and showing little sign of slowing down anytime soon. Pimblett believes that Makhachev's rise is about to hit a wall. When asked about who would be the lightweight champion at the end of 2022, Pimblett believed that it would come down to the winner of the Charles Oliveira and Justin Gaethje fight. Whoever wins out of Oliveira and Gaethje, because I can't see Makhachev beating either one of them, said Pimblett on the Believe You Me podcast with Michael Bisping. One factor that led Pimblett to believe that we would see a halt to Makhachev's progress was the idea that he's had limited competition. Makhachev hasn't fought anyone, lad. He's only fought Dan Hooker. I think I'd submit Hooker in the first round. He's a kickboxer. I'd take him down and submit him.
But him versus Volk's going to be a scrap. Volk, especially if Volk's power transfers up to 155, because probably going to have a speed advantage, and his cardio is going to hold up even more because he's moving up a weight. So it's a very interesting fight. I'm looking forward to watching it, to be honest.
While Bisping was surprised by Pimblett's belief, he understood where Pimblett was coming from, after thinking about the Hooker fight, saying he's got little defensive grappling, but he's not a grappler by any stretch of the imagination. So that was a good matchup. Pimblett doesn't believe that it would be one of the two that would be Makhachev, as he doesn't even think that Makhachev could get past Beneil Dariush. I think Dariush beats Makhachev. I think Dariush is very underrated. I think he's quality. While Dariush would appear to be an underrated fighter and has explained himself why this is, Bisping then questioned if it would be between him, Oliveira, and Gaethje for the title, but Pimblett quickly removed Dariush's name from the title discussion when it came down to him versus Gaethje or Oliveira. It's Gaethje or Oliveira. I really can't pick between one of them. Saying that, I'm gonna go with Gaethje, even though I went with Poirier over Oliveira, and after watching that fight as well, I'm watching that thinking, if Oliveira can do that to you, then I can too. Pimblett always seems to fancy himself against top fighters, but admits himself that MMA Matt doesn't actually work out like that.
It's just another fight, lad. You know what I mean? This is just standard. Every fight's gonna be the biggest fight of my career, every one I take, so I just take everything in my stride, lad. This is business as usual.
MMA math doesn't work like that, but when you're watching fights, you just think, if you can do that in that position, then I can too. Paddy Pimblett didn't hold back on his predictions for Islam Makhachev's chances at UFC 280 when he spoke to the press at UFC London Media Day in July. The baddie didn't rate the level of Islam Makhachev's previous opponents. He was seemingly surprised that the Russian had been given a title shot after only beating a handful of ranked fighters. Makhachev has beaten Dan Hooker and Arman Tsarukyan, who are both currently ranked within the top 15 of the UFC's lightweight division. The Russian is currently ranked number 4 in the division.
Saw this in my future. I knew what was coming. I always said I'm going to be the biggest star in this sport, and none of it takes me by surprise. You know what I mean? I'll stop and give anyone me time, as long as they use the manners. You know what I mean? I don't like it when people are rude. That's it. As long as people say please and they don't just headlock me and try and take a selfie. You know what I mean? I'll take time out of my day to speak to anyone, because without them fans I wouldn't be where I am today.
Well, we know that Islam won his fight against Charles Oliveira. Pimblett predicted that he couldn't get past 3 rounds against Charles. Before the match, he predicted, I think Charles Oliveira wins. I think he gets a finish within 3 rounds. Simple, you know what I mean? They're both unbelievable fighters. Islam is quality, but he hasn't fought the caliber of opponent that Charles has fought, and I think Charles gives him so many tests, like he hasn't been tested like he will be against Charles. The Englishman then continued to question who the Russian has beaten in order to get a title shot against Oliveira. He hasn't fought no one in the top 10. Islam, he's getting a title shot? Just Dan Hooker, who was on like 3 weeks notice. Yeah, Charles Oliveira all day. Well, we know that his prediction was wrong, and this shows us that Paddy is taking Islam lightly, and if we ever see the fight between the two, Paddy might have the same outcome as Oliveira. The thing is that Islam Makhachev has beaten some big names since joining the UFC back in 2015. He got the better of the likes of Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, Thiago Moises, Drew Dober, and Arman Tsarukyan, and most recently, Charles Oliveira, within his last 6 outings for the UFC. Islam Makhachev has an impressive professional MMA record of 23 wins and just 1 loss, with 11 of those victories coming under the UFC banner. The Russian lost for the first and only time in his second appearance in the organization against Adriano Martins. Martins finished the bout within just 1 round, knocking out Makhachev in a shock result at UFC 192 Cormier vs. Gustafsson. Adriano Martins has since been cut from the UFC and most recently competed in Copa Norte de MMA 2021 finals. He lost to Carlos Silva and now has a professional record of 28-12. Martins landed a perfect counterhook on the chin of Islam, which instantly ended the bout. It was by far the biggest win of the Brazilian's career. The loss clearly didn't affect Makhachev's growth too much though, with the fighter remaining unbeaten since losing to Martins. Paddy Pimblett is one of the fiercest fighters in the UFC. While he has largely fought opponents who cannot rival his stardom, his performances and accompanying talk have won over the hearts of the fans. One of the many reasons for Pimblett's rise to the top has been his ability to say things without shielding any true feelings about them. As such, after his last win over Jordan Levitt in July, he used his voice to amplify the concerns surrounding mental health concerns for men, having very recently lost a good friend of his to suicide. Now, in the lead up to his UFC 282 fight, he has again used his voice to express something, which has intrigued the MMA community. However, it has more to do with his own fighting ability this time. Speaking to the media at his scrum, he said, "I got so much stick for picking Charles over Islam, I thought Charles was gonna win. Can I have a prediction anymore? People saying, you haven't given props to Islam. I have. He looked unbelievable that night. He absolutely dominated Charles. At this juncture, however, he said something that caught people out. I would have put up a better fight than Charles did that night. To be honest, for someone that is not ranked at the minute, it does seem like a bit of a jump to suggest that they could have put on a better showing than a lightweight champion. However, that is why people love the baddie. There is no holding back of punches of any sort whatsoever. What he says, he usually believes in. Islam Makhachev takes on Alexander Volkanovski for the lightweight belt at UFC 284. The two had previously engaged in a lot of banter, with the Russian calling the short guy into the octagon after his win over Charles Oliveira. Talking about it, he said, him, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski is going to be a scrap. Volk's power transfers up to 155, so he's going to have a speed advantage. His cardio is going to hold up even more because he's moving up in weight. It is a very interesting fight. I'm looking forward to watching it, to be honest. Pimblett ended his preview right there without giving a final prediction. However, that just goes to show how tense and closely fought the fight will turn out to be when the two juggernauts do end up locking horns in February. Expect an MMA bonanza for the ages.